Ba. Greetings, one and all, to the most cursed, most cringiest corner of the internet. A YouTube channel content creator, actively alienating everyone, in both the analog and digital world. Well, welcome and good evening, you wonderful dice of all alignments. I am Lunar D8. This is Let's Play My Dear Delirium. Part 1. Bah. Just double checking OBS. Yep, OBS Chan's good. This game is free, so if you want to play it yourself on Steam, it is free. It's also apparently fully voice acted, except for this part, I guess. All eyes are focused on the plentiful bounty laid before them. Elliot sheepishly curls a strand of his brown hair and gestures to the girl across the table.
After you.
Had to click the enter button.
No, Elliot, I insist.
The standoff lasts a few seconds before the tension breaks with the pouring of tea beside them. Jacob carefully sets the teapot down and takes a quick sip, letting out a great, content sigh.
You're no fun at all, Jacob.
Anybody would think the world's crashing down on Sasha, but her disappointment earns only laughter from her companions. Elliot quickly busies himself, filling a plate with an assortment of sweets, while Sasha steals away a lavish cake.
You're not having anything, Jacob. I don't think Sasha would have poisoned them.
Elliot, how could you? I poured my heart and soul into this and you think I would poison it?
Maybe it's that heart of yours that's got the poison then.
A smile breaches the blond boy's face as he takes another sip to hide it from the accused. He had never been one to tempt fate, and it wasn't changing now.
If she was after me, I'd be long gone by now.
Huh. Finally some respect.
Pouting, Sasha stares defiantly at Jacob, much to her ire. He remains totally unfazed. She sighs heavily, plunging her fork into her cake. Maybe something sweet will ease the pain her friends inflicted on her. From across the table, a faint giggle emanates from Elliot, clearly relishing her misery.
Something to say, huh?
I was just thinking. You two make quite the pair.
Silence falls across them for a second, a very long second. It ends with Sasha nearly topples from her chair in a fit of laughter, while Jacob hangs his head in a hand.
You hear that, Jacob? We're quite the pair. Doesn't that just warm your heart?
Please, don't lump me in together with her, Elliot.
The pain in Jacob's voice can't be more at odds with the sheer amusement of Sasha's.
You two really don't see it? It's like you're two parts of a whole.
Elliot had always found his friends peculiar, and even now they prove an enigma at times. He'd rarely even seen them apart, so the thought came naturally to him. When he first met them, their energy had almost steamrolled him. Elliot, quiet by nature, had felt like he had been cast inside a typhoon. It had been a blessing to have Jacob there to rein in Sasha, but sometimes it almost felt like they played off each other. How long had it been? Try as he might, Elliot can't quite remember how many days had passed, weeks, months. He wasn't sure. The past blurred together, and the more he tries to remember, the foggier it becomes. It feels so close. Yet in that time, however, long or short, he'd never once been ungrateful. Before meeting Jacob and Sasha, his world had lacked color. Dullness had reigned supreme, and he had been a helpless captive. Sasha's relentless attacks had broken down his shell, and Jacob had drawn him out. A tinge of concern mixes into Jacob's voice. Elliot snaps from his reverie. His vision is blurred. He had been staring straight at the lights throughout.
Sorry, don't mind me. Just got caught up thinking of when we'd met.
His companions blink at him, then their concern draining away. Not that Sasha's expression ever looked concerned. In fact, it almost looked triumphant.
Fine, you win.
Jacob takes an almost indignant swig from his tea before refilling the cup.
Thank you, thank you. You can buy me something later.
Just nothing too pricey. Got it? Work doesn't pay well enough to waste money on you.
Jacob, you wound me. Would I ever ask for much?
As the pair rattle on, Elliot sits in stunned silence. He hasn't the faintest idea of what went on while he was reminiscing.
Excuse me?
At his words, Jacob crossed his arms and looked away, while Sasha snickers evilly.
You see, dear Elliot, my dear, dear Elliot, Jacob and I had a bet. A wager of sorts.
Elliot's confusion must be clear as day, prompting Sasha to press on.
What could our darling boy be thinking? What distracted him from our wonderful company? And to that I said, only we are charming enough to steal your attention from us.
And I figured maybe he'd wisened up and started ignoring her. I was deeply disappointed, Elliot.
I'm sorry?
It's all a little too much for Elliot to process at once. It's all he could do to stammer out an apology. As the words sink in, a slight frown creases his face.
Nothing more than a pawn in your games.
No, don't think like that, Elliot.
A point to score in an endless competition.
All right, we get it. Sasha, quit making bets on Elliot, would you?
Hey, you're part of this too, Jacob. Don't try to weasel out of this one.
Their banter comes to a halt as Elliot lets loose a laugh.
I'll be. That's a nice sight.
Don't go getting sentimental now. Though, you're right, it's not bad.
Sasha and Jacob share a look between each other, while Elliot tries to rein himself in. They really get to see him at ease, and it brings them each a smile. Though Elliot often plays along with their antics, it's just that, playing along. Try as they might, it's hard to really lift his spirits when he's down. Their efforts today are bearing fruit, but they weren't always so lucky. It had become a little more common in days of late, but they can't grow complacent. Jacob shoots a questioning glance to Sasha, who simply nods, a smirk playing on her lips. Maybe today will be different. And yet, when his eyes turn back to Elliot,
Hey, Elliot, what have you been doing over there?
Elliot's scribbling comes to a halt.
Drawing something. I've been enjoying it lately. It's really peaceful.
Oh, is that so?
Sasha grins as a blush creeps up Elliot's face. He tries to cover the drawing, but Sasha snatches away.
This is...
She holds in her hands a rough drawing of a yellow flower, wilting on the page. Her lips twitch.
lovely, Elliot. You've got a real talent.
Jacob peers over at the page. Soaking in the sight, it's definitely
Put
dying.
me to shame, Elliot. But I have to ask, why is it so dead?
Sasha rams an elbow into Jacob's side, earning a wince.
Dead?
Elliot's head tilts to the side as he grapples with Jacob's question.
Flower, Jacob. Why would it be dead?
His eyes are clear and honest as he meets Jacob's puzzled stare.
Of course. messing with you, Elliot. You don't need to take us so seriously, really.
Her words drawing Elliot's gaze from Jacob, Sasha takes a final bite of her cake.
With flowers like these.
Her words are met with another silence as Elliot mulls over the question.
Did I can't remember. It seems so long ago.
Jacob slides the drawing back to Elliot, his eyes immediately locking on the image before him. A minute passes by with little more than idle clinking of Jacob's teacup.
Sorry. I don't think I quite understand, Sasha.
Elliot shakes his head, his eyes dance with thoughts, scrambling for an answer.
Don't sweat it, buddy. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, let alone anything from years ago.
A giant grin flashes across Jacob's face, his chair creaking as he leans back. His energy is infectious, and soon enough his smile spreads to Elliot.
I always knew you looked better with a smile. Now eat up before I snatch it all away.
Sasha's teasing gets a shaky laugh from Elliot, but his composure returns.
Don't mind if I do.
He seems cheerful today.
Quiet hope fills her voice. Maybe this time it will be different. Maybe they can make progress. The light that filters through the one-way glass softly illuminates her features. A faint sparkle of excitement plays in her eyes as she watches Elliot smiling alongside his companions on the other side.
If you get ahead of yourself.
A sigh escapes Caitlin's lips. Ever since she'd been brought on, she'd seen despair grips Elliot day after day. She could only hope that days like these would come more
Do
frequently.
you really mean to tell me seeing him like this doesn't raise your spirits even a little, James?
I'd love to be as idealistic as you, Caitlin, but I've already seen this cycle play out. Today will be no different.
Watch, observe. Those were the directives they'd been given, and each day they'd played their role. At first, Caitlin had been enthusiastic. It was her chance to do something, create meaningful change for once. She cast a sidelong glance at James, who had been her only consistent company at their station for the past month. She can see her own changes reflected in him. She'd once asked him how long he'd been here. His answer? Too long. Through the window, movement catches her eye. Another bout of jovial play. Sasha investigating something as usual. Ever since they'd started visiting, Sasha and Jacob had begun unlocking a subdued radiance in Elliot, though he's still far from truly shining. Seeing the joy infecting the trio, Caitlin's eyes glaze over. The look of smugness on Sasha's face as she playfully torments Elliot. A sour taste spread through her mouth. Swallowing her misgivings, she mouths to herself, "That's part of the job," a mantra she found herself using far too often. To her side, James writes something down on his clipboard.
Something catch your eye.
Just noting the way they're acting. The report is due by the end of the week, and with the way things are now, I imagine they'd find it quite interesting.
Even a month on, Caitlin still doesn't know much about her employer. The contract she'd signed seemed to be with a mostly hollow company. Through the interviews, it all seemed so standard, almost too normal. The promise of making a life better had sounded so sweet. It wasn't until she'd signed the dotted line that the guise began to fade. Whenever she asks James, it feels like he has some idea what's going on, but chooses not to think about it. Maybe it's better not knowing. Her stomach twists at the thought. Pulling her gaze away from James, Caitlin peers back into the bright room. Jacob was busy playing the moderator, keeping Sasha in line. The whole dynamic felt uncanny to her as an outside observer, but judging by the grin on Elliot's face, it was working.
can see why they came together. The last pair never got this kind of reaction out of him.
Sasha and Jacob have been visiting Elliot for the last 3 weeks. Caitlin had arrived barely in time to see the changeover, and at first she was terrified at the thought. But Elliot seemed barely to notice. Or it had been repressed. Like everything else. The thought unnerves Caitlin. It was her job to work through these issues. But it would be generous to say she's accomplished anything. Her brows knit as she watched the pointless banter inside the other world. As she does, she notices Sasha glance at her phone. Some kind of
I
message.
hope you're ready. If we can get something meaningful today, I'm sure they'll be overjoyed.
Again, James speaks of they.
Do you only see him as a subject? He's human too, just like either of us. We could make a difference for him, James.
It's old rhetoric, a conversation they've had before, yet nearly every day it
You
resurfaced.
do well to create that divide yourself, Caitlin. If you'd see this pattern play out as many times as I have, you'd be a little more aware of that.
So you're saying I should give up on him?
I'm not saying that. Just don't get your hopes up.
A silence envelops the pair as they focus back on their duty. It would be the most dull work Caitlin had ever done if it didn't tear at her heart so often. Sometimes she wished it were just dull work. Maybe it would be better